He looked like any other quiet rancher, weathered hands, worn boots, a man who saved his words for when they mattered. Silas Ward had built this place beam by beam 15 years ago. A house that seemed carved from the valley itself. Honest wood and patient labor. Hard work. Fair wages. A kept word. That was his creed. And you could see it in the way the porch boards held his weight and the gate swung true. 3 months back, Mercy Whitmore showed up at his door, hat in hand, desperation shading the corners of her eyes. Maybe 20, old in the ways that pain makes you old. She didn't offer a story, and Silas didn't ask. She needed work. He needed help keeping the house. The deal was clean. She swept, cooked, fixed what needed fixing, and moved with the hush of someone used to being ignored. He respected that. In his experience, talkers wasted your daylight. The quiet ones saved theirs for the truth. But that morning, the truth limped across his kitchen. Silas came in off the porch, dust on his boots and the cold of dawn riding his shoulders. Through the window, he caught Mercy, her right leg dragging just enough to make each step a flinch. She paused every few feet, steadying herself on the table edge, jaw set against whatever bit at her from the inside. The look wasn't new. He'd seen hints, small irregularities in her movement. Today it was worse, like something inside had torn just a breath further than yesterday. He pushed the door open. The hinges greeted him with their old, tired groan. Mercy straightened at once, hiding pain the way a hand hides a bad card. "Morning, Mr. Ward. Coffee's almost ready." Her voice had that lightness that isn't light at all. The careful music of someone trying to convince the world everything's fine. Silas hung his hat, took in the room without staring, the careful way she lowered a cup, fingers trembling, the way her shoulders held tight as if bracing for a blow that hadn't yet arrived. He took the cup she offered, and in that brush of skin against skin, he felt the chill of her hand despite the warm stove. She flinched, not surprised, expecting pain where there was none. Mercy. She stopped wiping the same clean counter she'd wiped twice already. "You're hurt." Not a question. A weather report. The kind a rancher trusts more than clouds. Silence held the room. A meadowlark sang somewhere outside, turning the open air into something careless, almost cruel against the hush within. The clock on the mantel ticked. Mercy turned slowly, and the lie on her face couldn't outrun the facts on her skin. A split lip, left side, still raw, a yellow bruise blooming across her cheekbone, half concealed by hair drawn forward like a curtain. But it was her eyes that told him the storm's direction, the dull resignation of somebody who'd stopped believing better was possible. "I fell," she said too quickly. "Clumsy. Stairs. Last evening." Silas set his cup down with the care of a man placing dynamite. Her cabin didn't have stairs, never had. He built it himself, porch step, threshold, level floor. He could find studs in those walls with his eyes closed. "Show me the stairs," he said. The color left her face. For a heartbeat, he thought she'd confess. Instead, she lifted her chin, that fragile defiance that breaks a little more each time it's used. "I should get back to work." The lie hung like smoke from a dying fire, thin, bitter, unable to hide the burn mark it left behind. She moved about the kitchen in measured inches, the choreography of someone who has mapped a body for pain and knows every trigger by heart. This wasn't the first time. It was a practiced quiet, the kind that keeps you alive and unseen. Silas had spent years reading sign, the curl of a cloud line, the shift in cattle, the hush before a lightning strike. He could read this. 2. Whatever was happening to Mercy Whitmore wasn't an accident. It had a pattern, and patterns pointed to a who. He watched her limp toward the pantry and made a decision that slid into him like a blade finding its sheath. Familiar, inevitable, final. He would find the man who did this. And when he did, that man would learn what it meant to cross Silas Ward, who believed protection wasn't a kindness you offered when convenient. It was a duty you shouldered like a beam you promised not to drop. That afternoon, Silas watched his own land like a man who suspected a snake under his floorboards. He kept to the barn's shadow, a broken harness in his hands to explain the waiting, eyes fixed on the trail that stitched town to his valley. The sun slid west, turning the world honey gold, beautiful in the way dangerous things can be. A rider appeared. Even at distance, the slouch was theatrical. Deputy Vernon Briggs, wearing his badge like a dare. He rode as if the earth were obliged to carry him, and looked around like a thief who had convinced himself he was a sheriff. Silas's jaw set. He'd never liked Briggs. The man had the mean glint of someone who enjoys the bruise more than the lesson. But this wasn't law. This was appetite. Briggs tied off at the post near Mercy's cabin. He checked the yard with a jittery look that didn't fit the swagger, then rapped the door with the back of his hand, hard enough that the sound carried 50 yards. The door opened fast. Too fast, like Mercy had been listening for it. He pushed his way in. She stepped back. The door shut. Silas's hands curled. Every part of him wanted to cross that yard and end something. Another part, older, colder, told him to wait. Violence right now might make her life smaller, not bigger. Learn first, then act. He paced the shadow, the harness leather creaking in his grip, the dust under his boots scuffed into a nervous crescent. 20 minutes can last a year if you fill them with what-ifs. Silas counted them by breaths and by the tight ache climbing his jaw. When the door opened, Briggs came out first, adjusting his gun belt with the satisfied fidget of a man who believed the world owed him its softest parts. Mercy stood in the threshold behind him, one hand pressed to the frame, holding herself together with wood because flesh wasn't enough. Briggs swung up, whistling a tune too cheerful for the evening light, and rode toward town without a glance back. The sound floated across the yard like an insult wrapped in ribbon. Mercy lingered one heartbeat longer, then disappeared into the dim cabin. The puzzle finished itself in Silas's head with ugly ease. A deputy with reach and no conscience, a young woman alone and marked by fear, a bruise that matched a threat. He stared at the mountain line until the day thinned to thread, then lay awake through a night that refused to end, turning plans over like stones and studying the things that live beneath. By dawn, he had his answer. He would ask her. He would listen. And if what he already knew in his bones proved true, the man responsible would learn that there are some quiet men you should have left alone. Morning came heavy and low, clouds like a wool blanket pressing the valley flat. Mercy moved slower than yesterday, careful in a way that made careful look like pain wearing a mask. Fresh bruises crept along her neck, half hidden behind hair pulled forward like storm covers on a window. "Mercy," Silas said, the quiet in his voice stronger than a shout. "I need to ask you something. I need the truth." The coffee pot trembled in her hands. A thin river of black spilled over her knuckles and steamed. She didn't flinch at the heat. Pain had taught her different things to fear. "Deputy Briggs," he said. "He's been coming here, hasn't he?" Her knuckles went white on porcelain. She set the pot down too hard. The cup clinked against the saucer like teeth. "I don't know what you mean." "I saw him," Silas said, steady as a fence post in wind. "I saw how you looked when he left." "How long?" The question broke something. Her shoulders began to shake. Small at first, then an earthquake you feel in the floorboards. She kept her eyes on the table a second longer, then raised them. Wet. Furious at themselves for being wet. And so very tired. "You don't understand," she said, voice splitting on the rock of it. "He's a deputy. Who believes me over him? Who even cares what happens to someone like me?" The story came in pieces. The way a dam fails, first a leak, then everything. 3 months ago, Cedar Falls had been a place to disappear from whatever hunted her back east. Briggs noticed her the first day, promises with a smile that soured into threats when she didn't smile back. Under his protection, he'd said, and made the town believe it. Work vanished. Doors didn't open. He visited at hours when the good slept and the afraid pretended to. "If you tell anyone, you disappear," he told her. "There are minds in these mountains that don't give back what they take." Her voice dropped to something the room had to lean in to hear. He said he's done it before. Silas felt the cold settle into him, not the kind that shivers off with motion, but the kind that hones a man down to his edges. "Why didn't you run?" "With what money?" She laughed without joy. "Who would hire me? He made sure everyone knew I was his. You were the only one who'd take me in." Silas rose, palms flat on the table as if to steady the house itself. "He's not going to hurt you anymore." "Mr. Ward, please. He'll kill you. Or make something up and have me hauled off until the world forgets." Silas was already at the door. He looked back once. "I'm not good at talking. Mercy. But I've always been good at making sure the right thing gets done." He stepped into the gray and was gone, leaving the kitchen warm and empty, and Mercy with a feeling in her chest she hadn't dared test in months, something that felt like hope and hurt like one more bruise. Cedar Falls slouched between two hills like a town that had forgotten how to stand tall. Storefronts squinted against the morning, paint peeled thin as old stories. Silas took the middle of Main Street like it belonged to anyone who needed it enough. People watched. They always did when he came to town, because he only came when it mattered. Briggs leaned against the saloon post, badge catching lazy light, voice too loud for the size of his audience. He was retelling victory to men who knew better than to correct him. His laugh had edges. Silas stopped 10 feet away and waited. It took a heartbeat for Briggs to notice. When he did, a small muscle jumped along his jaw. His hand drifted toward the comfort of the gun he wore, like punctuation. Well, he drawled, the hermit rancher, finally feeling sociable. "I came to talk about Mercy Whitmore." The name fell heavy and flat. Conversations thinned to threads that snapped in the air. Someone coughed. A horse stamped as if the ground disagreed with it. The town turned its ear. Briggs's eyes went hard and flat. "Don't know her." I think you do. Silas stepped once. No rush. Voice plain enough to travel. You've been hurting a woman who works for me. That makes you a coward with a badge. Heat climbed the deputy's neck. Serious words. Ward, you got proof? Silas took a folded paper from his vest and let it open slow. Blank. But Briggs didn't need to know that. You could read guilt by what it watched. And the way his eyes caught on that paper told Silas everything. Thing about secrets, Silas said, is they don't stay where you put them. The gun jumped into Briggs's hand like it knew the route. The crack split the morning. Wood exploded where Silas had been. The crowd scattered in a panic of boots and shouted oaths. Powder hung in the air like bitter fog. Silas was already moving, 15 years of ranch work turning him into a man who could lift a beam and not let it fall. He slammed Briggs into the saloon wall. The glass shivered in its frame. They fought for the gun like two men wrestling over the end of something. Silas wrenched the deputy's wrist until bone complained. The weapon clattered and skittered across planks to the boots of Marshal Luther Kane, who'd run at the sound. "That's enough," Kane barked, iron in his tone but muzzle low. "Both of you, stand down." Silas lifted his hands and stepped back, breathing hard. Briggs sagged against the wall, cradling his wrist, hate spitting from his eyes like sparks. "He attacked me! Arrest him!" Kane didn't look at Briggs. He looked at the town, at the faces that had learned to be small. And he saw something had shifted. Somebody had finally stood up. "Anyone see what happened?" Kane asked. Calm laid over steel. Silas stood with his hands open. Briggs clutched his wrist and spat his story at the dirt. For a long moment, the town said nothing, the habit of silence older than most of the people keeping it. Then Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, small, gray, spine straighter than her years. "Marshal," she said, voice trembling but refusing to break. "There are things you ought to know about your deputy." "Don't listen to her," Briggs snapped. "She's crazy." A hammer of a voice from the blacksmith followed. "He threatened my daughter when she said no." A storekeeper. "Money went missing after he searched my till." A ranch hand. "He said the badge made him the law." The stories came one after another, stacking into a shape you couldn't ignore. Fear turned into anger. Anger into witness. Witness into something that looked like a town remembering itself. Kane's face darkened, less surprise than confirmation settling like dust. He turned to Briggs. "Vernon, tell me about Mercy Whitmore." "I don't lie to me. Not anymore." Silas stepped so the town could hear him without straining. "There's a young woman on my ranch living in fear of this man. Her bruises say what she's too afraid to." Briggs's voice pitched high with panic. "You can't believe them over me. I'm a sworn officer." Silas reached into his vest again. But this time, he brought out what mattered, a torn strip of fabric he'd picked up near Mercy's cabin. He held it up. The pattern matched the shirt on Briggs's back, like a signature. Kane looked from cloth to shirt to man. The judgment in his eyes wasn't loud. True judgment rarely is. He holstered slow, as if giving the moment its weight. "Vernon Briggs, you're under arrest." The cuffs clicked, a bright metal sound in the dust. The crowd exhaled in a single human breath they hadn't realized they'd been holding for years. Relief doesn't cheer, it settles. People looked at each other like neighbors again, Kane turned to Silas. "Bring Miss Whitmore tomorrow. She'll give her statement." Silas nodded once. "She'll be here." The jail door clanged shut behind Briggs, and the sound traveled down Main like a bell that meant something. Kane hung the key where everyone could see it, a small mercy, a large message. Outside, he faced Silas with a look that had learned something the hard way. "I should have seen it sooner," he said. "Should have stopped it." "We all should have," Silas answered. "But it's stopped now." The ride home tasted like rain, storm-washed air, the earth sweet and clean. The mountains wore a line of lingering cloud, soft as smoke. He found Mercy on her porch, looking at those peaks as if they were new. When she heard the horse, she rose slow, questions gathering like birds on a fence. "It's done," Silas said, swinging down. "He's in a cell. He won't be bothering you or anyone else." Her knees folded. She sat hard on the steps, one hand over her mouth as if to keep the new air from escaping. Tears came, not the quiet leaks she'd taught herself to manage, but the kind that wash a person out and leave them lighter. The valley listened and said nothing. Sometimes you honor a thing by not interrupting it.